want out of life? It's a pretty simple question, right? And it's often met with a much, much simpler answer. Usually something along the lines of, oh, I don't really know. I just want to be happy. And the problem with that sentence is it belongs to a culture of good vibes only, pursue happiness, make happiness the goal. And the problem with that is you're making happiness the destination. And happiness is a very temporary emotion. It's impossible to sustain. You see, I think people quite often misinterpret what they mean by happiness. When they say, I just want to be happy, I don't think they're envisioning walking down the street with these sort of big gaping smiles, completely elated and oblivious to the world. I think when someone says, I just want to be happy, what they're actually saying is, I just don't want to be suffering anymore. Which is absolutely fine, that's fine. But the thing is, the absence of suffering isn't happiness. The absence of suffering is contentment. And that's interesting because a contented individual harbors a sense of stability within themselves. And it's that stability that creates a competent individual, that creates this emotionally competent individual. And it's those competencies that we see in the individual who has emotional control. They're in line with themselves. They are incongruent with themselves. The problem with people who make happiness their goal is the fact that in order to remain happy, they're going to have to avoid every single situation that will make them unhappy. So for example, they would have to avoid every sad situation, every emotionally volatile situation, because the world is full of triggers. So then what happens is they sort of build up these kind of barriers and they end up being quite confined in their own self-made prisons and in the end quite isolated, which ironically still makes them unhappy and arguably worse. See, unlike a happy individual who needs to avoid all of life's volatile situations in order to remain within their state of being, a competent individual can remain emotionally competent even in life's volatile situations because their internal stability is not predicated on the outside world, but rather within. So then the big question is, how do I become this emotionally competent being then? And I think we probably need to work backwards on that. First, we need to reflect on what is it that derails my internal stability? What is it that pulls me from my sharp, competent self? What is it that disconnects me from my reality, from myself, from who I am, from who I want to be? See, the obvious disconnectors are things like excessive drinking and drugs, but then there's also the not so obvious disconnectors, things like unresolved internal traumas, overworking, chronic stress, having our boundaries constantly crossed. And all of these things, when they come together, they essentially form a bit of a disconnect with us and they jeopardize our competencies as a result. Then we can ask, well, what makes for that competent individual? And remember that the competent individual is someone that is in line with themselves. They have that kind of connection to both the inside world and the outside world as well. So the question is, well, what makes you feel connected and alive? Is it going to the gym? Is it breathing? Is it meditating? Is it stretching? Is it walking? Is it running? Is it reading? Or is it just being in silence? What connects you to yourself? Because all of these things lead to the inner connection. But it isn't just the inner connection that we have. We also have these outside connections as well. Connections with friends and family and loved ones and therapy as well. All comes together to make an outward connection. So it's worth asking ourselves, what makes me a more competent individual? And that might involve working backwards. See, the point is, it's not about pursuing happiness and being happy. It's about pursuing that which increases my competencies as a person, that which makes me a sharper person, that which makes me a more stable person. See, for a competent individual, their stability isn't predicated on happiness. Their stability is predicated on inner congruence and contentment within themselves. So pursue that which increases your competencies, not dampens them.